But what occurred to me this morning as I was waking up was everybody's journey to get to where we are in this community today has been a unique one and a different one. And in order to get here, we had to move through a lot of considerations and beliefs that now we may consider false beliefs. And we've had to change our beliefs in order to get to where we could come in together as a community and be able to welcome all faiths. Practical Interfaith book, it really makes it, the person that wrote it has the distinction of establishing an interfaith community and having been a part of one. And so we've kind of grown into where we are now. And I'm sure it'll look totally different 5 or 6 years from now as the growth continues. Now, in order to get to where we are in our interfaith community, I think I certainly have moved through a number of lies. Some of them are small, some of them are bigger. And in order to get here, and because when we believe something, we have an allegiance to it. And so we're kind of stuck in it until we are able to move through that and discover that it is a lie. It isn't the truth of being. So, for instance, part of my journey into getting where I am is grown up as a Roman Catholic and 9 years of parochial school training. Um, you certainly learn a lot of things that you later in life you drop because there are no lot of. For instance, you believe that you're the only one church, one Catholic apostolic church, and if you went to another church or a temple, you were creating a sin. You were making a mistake, and and there's punishment for that. So I had to be willing to give that up in order to get to where I am now. And there have been other steps along the way. When I was a pastor of a New Thought church or New Thought movement, um, I got exposed. I got sick and ill, and a friend, there's no doctors available, so a friend suggested I go to Mexico with her and meet a shaman who's a healer. And I did, and that opened up a whole new dynamics for me. And this form of healing was more of a laying on of hands. Had to do with intuitive knowing. It had to do. I learned a lot of things from that. But in the teaching that I was disseminating to our New Thought group was that um, all healing is in mind, and I don't I agree with that. But it was that you didn't do laying on of hands and things like that. It was a kind of against the rules, and because well, partially because it could be legally challenging if you put hands on people. The church, could come under attack if a person did inappropriate things with the hands. So anyway, I found that was a stumbling block for me, and I gave up what I was doing to look for something more, and which I did find something more. Bobby's coming to join us. Come on in, dear. So, on my quest and my spiritual journey, I sure
Morning,
never
Bob.
gave up a deep appreciation for the Holy Mother, or Mary, representing the divine feminine. And I went on many quests into many places in the world where there were apparitions. And of course, a lot of people believe that apparitions are lies, or they're fabrications, or they're hallucinations. And so, everyone has to decide for themselves, is that a big lie or is it not? And so for me, it was a very powerful demonstration of something most of us don't understand. And then later on, when I met Arnold Michael and found out more about him and what he was about, uh, and that we had training in science of mind, religious science, which also included studying all different religions. So it opened up a new panorama for me in my understanding. And eventually, it led to finding that Arnold Michael had, he had started a number of churches and done a wonderful job, and that he was a true gift to the spiritual communities that he taught. And he did have a mystical experience with maybe more than one, with a pine tree. And anyway, it evolved into that I found out he had been honorary made a bishop in what was called the Old Catholic Church. So then I expanded into understanding what that was and got involved in it. And he and his wife, after he passed, that me and his wife, after Arnold passed, got more involved in understanding that community, and eventually started what was called the Free Church of Antioch. And the Free Church of Antioch was based on the notion that the first true Christian church, or where the Christians, or call themselves Christians, came together, was in Antioch. And so that was an interesting idea that, and the true Christian church seemed to be really spiritually endowed, and certainly recognized women and men as being equal spiritually, which is another notion, isn't it? That we're all created equal. Where are we created equal? If we're all looking so different in appearances, thumbprints are different. So everything's different about each one of us. So we're all individualizations. Where we are one is in spirit, and it takes an experience or two or three or four to kind of really get that we are truly one in spirit. The only way we can find that oneness in spirit is through, you call it divine love, or call it that which shows that separation in spirit is really a lie. You can't separate spirit from itself. So anyway, in this old Catholic church, it was what happened in Holland. When the first time the Pope declared himself infallible, there were a bunch of bishops that said, in Holland, that said, no. Anybody is human. We can all make mistakes. And so they certainly must have been aware of the divine inspiration available to everyone. And so they said, no, we don't accept that. So they kind of pulled out from the Roman Catholic under the Pope. But they kept the liturgy and the sacraments and all the other things they were doing pretty much intact. And so it was delightful for me to, that's my wife's phone. it was delightful to me to find out that yeah, she's going to answer her phone. She doesn't want to disrupt what we're talking about, and it's difficult for her to move. So anyway, it was wonderful for me to discover this community of people that were kind of revolutionaries, free spirited. But even within this community, there were people that held the rituals as dogmatic, um, or it's like when the church taught Latin, and I certainly had 3 years of Latin, and you had to keep the service in the old tradition of Roman Latin. Well, people grew out of that, and if you didn't grow out of it, you were stuck in the belief that it had to be said in the Latin language. So we have that conservatism in our own lives, and we have liberalism in our own lives. So, what is it that liberates us from our past beliefs and makes a transition into a more broadening understanding of the infinite presence of God expressing its life through all of us? And so then the growth of the Madonna ministry evolved with Arnold's passing, and eventually the torch was passed over to me. And uh, when I changed the name of the church from the Church of the Talking Pines to the Madonna Ministry, because I certainly, the book Blessed Among Women intuitively spoke to me more than any book in this world that I've read. And so I honored the Madonna, or the teaching really within the book. I found tremendously spiritual. I got a lot of value from it. And so and my wife was telling me, no, it sounds too Catholic to make it a Madonna ministry. Well, it still sounds kind of Catholic, and there's certainly people that questions Madonna. And then as we evolved from the Madonna ministry into the Madonna Interfaith community, there were some people rebelling against the change. They wanted to be conservative and keep it the way it was. And most of us, were saying, no, we need to broaden our scope. We need to really welcome all traditions and all faiths and not be stuck in our own. Now, it's easy to get stuck in our own. For me, growing up with the seven sacraments, kind of a deep appreciation, because they're really initiation steps in our life. And so the seven sacraments meant something to me. And not only that, is that then when we started doing what we created, the sacrament of empowerment that Arnold gave to us, the sacrament of empowerment is pretty much what we use when we ordain or consecrate a bishop in our community. So it is a sacrament in the sense that it's filled with love and light and power. And it recognizes the presence of God within the person that we are consecrating or ordaining. And if we are unable to do that, then the sacrament is dead. It's just words. So what gives a sacrament life is the love that's transmitted in the process. So when each of us have been ordained into this community, and some of us consecrated, what we do is we transfer the love that's already in us ignites the love that's already in the recipient. And that's a sacrament. That's honoring the presence of God in another. And so sacraments, for me, don't need to be thrown out. They just need to be understood and appreciated. And so when we now examine ourselves in terms of where we've been, like, and we welcome Native Americans in our community, and we learn something about doing fire walks, or we learn something about sweat lodges, and then we move into other communities, Buddhist or Zen communities, and when we explore from a depth of understanding where we can let go of the lie that we've been holding on to make room for the Spirit to bring us into a greater appreciation and understanding for that all paths, not just the path we're creating here in our togetherness, but all paths, no matter what they are, will lead to greater understanding, or what Buddhists would call enlightenment. Enlightenment sounds like, okay, you almost have to be a saint to be enlightened. But the truth is, enlightenment means just to lighten up. Lighten up. In order to lighten up and find humor, for instance, within ourselves, we need to let go of our rigid beliefs that are tying us to some convention that doesn't allow us to appreciate other people's paths. So each of us are paths that have brought us into this realization that God is in all creation, and what we've come together is kind of a revolutionary idea, is that we can celebrate in one community all forms of spiritual beliefs that really come from a deep understanding that we are spiritually all one. And in order to really get there, we have to have experienced compassion and true love that's beyond possession. Possessive love doesn't cut it, gets us in trouble every time. But true love that frees us from the inability to comprehend, to witness, to credence to the good in all humanity, doesn't require a religion as such, but it does require a spiritual awakening. And so each of us here are pioneers in the field of recognizing that all religions and all walks of life have value. And whatever wakes us up to that inner knowing is the time for celebration. That's about all I need to say. But I invite, and I hope, and some of you have certainly in your talks have shared your progression as to how you got in our community and have a vested interest in keeping it going. And I hope you continue to share that with us. And what's in the practical interfaith community, it makes it very clear it's not about numbers, it's more about the quality of consciousness. So it isn't a question that we need to grow, because that big lie that was told in politics that we've all observed was about winning at all cost. If I lose the election, we're going to take over the White House. you know, we'll do it through violence. Doesn't matter, because there's no understanding in that. There's only, and we've all been, taught that winning is all important, you know. And so if we believe it to the point of devastate, we becomes devastating to us and to our community. So for us, then we need to discover if we're lying to ourselves somewhere, if we need to untangle ourselves from a belief that we have, um, and most of us, and probably all of us have, in order just even to be here in this congregation. So I implore you all to read the Practical Interfaith, and I think we can have more meaningful conversations coming from your viewpoint, from who you are and what brought you here. So now I open it up for discussions. I've certainly said enough. And so anyone else want to make comments on your what brought you here, and where you might have been stuck in a lie and been able to move through it in order to get to where you are now. No volunteers?
I appreciate the story, and you must be reading our minds, because this is part of why we asked to talk to you after, too. We're talking about legacy here. And so it's been really interesting. I'm taking notes too, but I did share the image in the chat if you want to look, where the 3 bullets I think you were referring to is, we are all, it was brothers and sisters. We are all siblings, I said, non-gender. And it's all based on love, compassion, and community. And I think that's been sort of that triad of, what do you call it, a thread that keeps us all together. We all stand in love and compassion, and we are trying to create community where we can be open, with open hearts and open minds, and
Right. You,
accepting of everybody's beliefs.
you found the 3 bullets. That's exactly what, what the book is about:
Yep.
love, compassion, and community. So no matter what you name your community, it doesn't matter as long as you bring love and compassion to that community.
I
So,
could I could speak to this from 100 different angles, but the one that feels the strongest right now and the most emotional actually almost does bring me to tears. I was raised in the South in a very conservative everything, and I moved north like 40 years ago because that's not who I was. And my my family belonged to the Church of Christ, not the Church of Christ Congregational, but just the Church of Christ. And when they were trying to convert me back when I left sort of the family belief, the it's been quite a few years since we were able to really communicate that well, because we were not only politically polar opposites, but religiously polar opposites. And they, their whole idea is that, man was above women, and women could not even teach men. They only could teach women and children, and that women had no say in the governing body of the church, those kind of things. And that God is a vengeful God, and my God was always a loving God. And it it took it took many years to come to a place where we are still polar opposites politically and polar opposites religiously or spiritually, but we are able now to be together with that love, compassion, and feel a sense of community when we're together. And that just brings up a lot of emotion every time I think about how far we've come. And it has nothing to do with having similar beliefs other than based on love. And we love each other. We know we're there for each other. And even COVID has brought us closer together because our whole family around the country does Zoom meetings every week. And we've even decided that after COVID's not even an issue, that we will continue this. The only sad part is we still can't talk religion. But if we can leave religion and politics out and just talk about ourselves and how much we love each other and what our lives are like, then we're good. So part of me's emotionally happy that we've come to that place, but still sad that we can't share the differences. We can only share the similarities, and it's a big step. And I still dream of more, but it's sort of like, yeah, I dream of more politically, but it's hard to stay with that because that doesn't change. Even when a piece of you hopes that it will change this time. So um, I'm just happy to be in a group of people who can embrace the differences and find that space of commonality, as opposed to just finding the space of commonality and pretending there's not the differences. So
I think one of the values of being in a ministry such as ours is that we get to lead by walking the example. And it doesn't necessarily mean we have to address the differences directly, meaning, oh, that book is right and that book is wrong, and or as we are all saying, nobody's wrong. But I'm in a community of people right now that are disrupting the systems of economics and, to a degree, politics too, and spiritual beliefs. And it's really interesting to see that in the diversity, and this is worldwide because nobody has borders anymore, people are still assuming things. Like, I feel like I'm being judged because I'm a white person from the US, and there's a certain expectation that I come from privilege. And it's like, well, no, not really. And as we explore the differences of how we're saying the new economy should be, we're doing value exchange as an example, instead of money and interest and conversion fees and working with international, exchanges and that the cost of such a thing. We're saying, you bring value to me, so I'm going to exchange my time and energy with you without the fiat, the dollar. And people are embracing it to a degree that I think that through walking the talk and disrupting the system that's ineffective or that challenges people to have to be wealthy to interact with each other, we're able to show that as a community, we can work together in harmony, and we can, value each other and say, look, I really appreciate your skill in this area, and I need that to fill in a blank in my life. And so I ask for their help. And in exchange, I'll either help somebody else or I'll help them in return. And there's this whole documentation that's called blockchain, which is it's a trust-based system that is adopted by people. A number of people will build a block, and until that is validated as true and real, that block will never exist. And so when you go to use that, that it's vetted. And so instead of vetting people to come into our ministry to be, supreme beings or all thinkers, in the sense we're training people by disrupting the system as it is to be more harmonious with exchanging something that is valuable, that is love and compassion, and finding value in anybody, no matter where they're from or what color their skin is or what their beliefs happen to be. And so instead of focusing on differences, we're actually paving the way by making something different and better. And it means something, it's meaningful in that way because we've co-created.
So you're pioneering, you're amongst the pioneers that are recognizing our monetary system is failing and needs to be changed. And good for you. Just as we are pioneering an interfaith community that recognizes there's value in all humanity, and we got to find it within ourselves, and we feel supported in a community that, like Alice, what you just shared with us is beautiful. It happens in all of our families. It's universal, and in the practical interfaith community, practical interfaith book that's written by Stephen Greenbaum, kind of discusses just what you've been talking about, is that we need to be willing to not impose our values on others because it creates the conflict. And so we bring conflict instead of resolution. But when we can share freely who we are, and no one else has to follow us and do what we do, there's a freedom in that. And there's a freedom in being really genuinely who we are. And if we can free ourselves to understand that we are free to be who we are, then we can free our sons, our daughters, our parents to be freely who they are, even though we may be in loggerheads about the intellectual differences that we have, and we abide in some other, they abide in a different value than we abide in.
Yeah, we call that decentralized governance.
What's that?
We're autonomous in a decentralized governance of what used to be, and we're creating our own way.
Yeah, like the founders of our Constitution certainly recognize the value in everyone. So they put together a Constitution that's supposed to, everybody has a voice, and not, and the true power isn't by taking power. The true power is finding that presence of love and compassion within ourselves, and whatever that is. We just had a living memorial service, another pioneering process for a friend of mine who has stage 4 cancer in his throat. And he feels his death is imminent. So somebody suggested, well, let's have a memorial service while you're still with us in this life. And so we had about 100 people on Zoom, all kind of pretty much testimonial to this person. And this person, I've gotten to know him pretty well, Gene Stone, has been a pioneer and a real advocate of correcting what's wrong, like, nuclear waste dumps here in our community. And when I attended a meeting with him when he was challenging Edison's mentality of, and our national mentality of keeping the waste buried where it's at, he came from a place of compassion. When he presents his facts, he's not He's not he's in opposition to the beliefs that they're holding to, but he's not in opposition to the spirit within the the people that work for Edison. So what he was coming from, he's what I call him is a spiritual warrior. He was about making change and bringing up what the change ought to look like and be, and but not being. He doesn't have to threaten anybody by that, and he doesn't have to feel threatened. But he's coming from a space of compassion, and so to me, that's a spiritual warrior. He's out there to present what ought to be, and but is not making. He's making the intellectual decision of beliefs wrong that they're holding on to, but he's not making the person wrong for having those beliefs.
Well, and I can say something that leads from that, not at all like that, but back right after the Capitol was taken over temporarily, I was so upset by that it was time for my family Zoom, and I thought, there's no way that we'll be able to openly discuss it freely, but I just felt the need to address it in a way that my entire family, who has varying beliefs, could deal with it. And I just said, my heart is very heavy about what's happening in our nation right now. And before we go on, can we just have a silent word of prayer and pray for our nation? And everybody agreed to do that. And it it felt like we came together with our differing beliefs, but our similarities again, and that we could relate on the level of praying for something that's where there's great unrest, and that our prayers might together make a difference. And I felt trepidation even going that far, because I didn't know how much it would open up and how crazy the conversation would get. But we were all able to just have a silent word of prayer for our nation and just keep it that simple and not address any our differing beliefs about the cause or what it means or whose fault it is, that kind of thing. So
That's a beautiful example, Alice. You're providing us with a lot of insight as you took your grief and your anger and you entered into a prayerful state and invited others to do that. And prayer, if it's worthwhile, it does bring us into that sense of um, unity or a sense of spiritual being, which you did so, and you found that within your prayer and within your family. So for that, since I'm going to canonize you a saint in the interfaith community.
oh, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And I second
It's
that motion.
it may sound simple if you're in a different situation with your family, but it was major. It was major to be able to just get through those few moments.
Hey,
So,
Alice, I thought, and you have to hear the whole thought, but I thought that what happened in Washington and the insurrection was really good thing, because it showed us what chaos will bring, you know, and people were in separate camps in different parts of the country fomenting taking over, on all sides. I'll take over, I'll take over, I'll take over. But the insurrection and the chaos shows us that cooperation is far, far, far better than that. Where different people are fighting each other. That the whole key to growing through this is getting back to the idea of cooperation and working together and what that entails. And
Right.
I think it can happen. It always can happen.
Yeah.
Because it's always present.
I agree with you.
Danny, and don't you think the chaos was created out of a big lie, perpetuating a big lie?
Yes, but the big lie was there before Trump. The biggest lie is that we're separated, that we're not all one. That's the biggest lie. and that, Laura, I think your cat wants to be in the group. I used to have a puppy that when I would meditate, he would come and just curl up in my lap and meditate with me, and that was really really nice. We always have possibilities. We're of the unlimited God, and we have unlimited possibilities. And the only way we go down is by limiting our possibilities and fighting each other. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union. You don't need to go any further than that.
Right. Thank you, Danny, for saying that.
So my religion is God, 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 God. So how is your religion different than mine? Elucidate it. If God is love and God is everywhere, what part of everywhere don't you understand? God is everywhere, before and the after.
And if you look at every religion, the underlying theme is the same. It's the man-made rules that create the chaos, I think, and it's the man-made rules that have always moved me away when I moved away. So if I can focus on that underlying theme that's true in all the religions, like what you're saying, in a sense, that I can come at it from a different frame of mind and a different energy. So
Yeah, and if you focus on that, there's no time that God's light is not present. There's never a second, there's never a moment when God's love and God's light is not present. Because all paths lead to God, because all paths are God. I have no problem with anybody who's celebrating God and love.
And that's one of the strengths of our community, is that we all have a common purpose and a common vision, but we embrace the diversity of how we get there. Okay, and that's the main strength of our community, is that we are able to do that every day in every way.
Yes.
Yeah. And Sally, you model it, and you can tell when you speak online, on the side of you wear many different hats.
I what?
Look at the hats next to you. You wear many different hats.
Oh, oh, my hat collection.
Yeah.
Well, next time I'll try the one with the feather. I have a crown too,
I love bringing humor to situations. When I was telling you about the this spiritual warrior, and we were doing a memorial service for him. And I saw on Zoom that there were about 100 people showing up. And when it was my turn to talk, I said, you know, what I've noticed is as a minister, when you have all these people gathered together, it's a time to take a collection. And certainly every community needs financial or support in the form of energy or cryptocurrency or dollars or whatever it is to continue. And that's why we're looking for a bookkeeper who can keep track of our finances and our expenditures and our income. So we are a business, and businesses require a certain format, requires an income, requires a structure, and certainly without that would be more chaotic. So we're getting late in the day. So is there, I think we certainly want to, I would like, and I think it's a very valuable part of our service is when we open up and pray for everyone and everything that interests us. I think when you read the book Practical Interfaith Community, and I hope you get it, half the book talks about starting an interfaith community if that's what you want to do. But I hope you do get it. So because it will stimulate some more conversation uh, and give us help. This person's gone through what we're going through right now. And so it helps us celebrate our diversity and helps us with understanding where we are. So who would like to do the closing with a prayer?
Well, I said I would, Charlie.
Thank you.
Well, the prayer is the same, that all paths lead to God because all paths are God. And there's nowhere that God is not. If you go up to the highest pinnacle of the Himalayas or the bottom of the ocean, God is in both places. God's in your girlfriends, your boyfriend.
Would you pray a little louder, Danny? I can't hear
I'm
you.
sorry. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Better. Yeah, better. Thank you.
So God's in your girlfriends, your boyfriends, your children, the road that you walk on, the sky that you look at, the heart that beats. There's nowhere that God is not. So God is also perfect health and perfect balance in that she is everything and she is balanced. And all you have to do is ask. And one of the best things that Jesus said is ask and it shall be given to you. So just ask to remember perfect health. That health is everywhere we travel, whether it's in this life or so-called next life, or the life before we came, or the life in the farthest reaches of the universe. There's nowhere that the spirit of love is not. And so we ask for that love and that balance to be remembered on the highest levels that we can attain to remember. So it is.